Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Coulson. I was going to read to you today the Mixed Up Chameleon as we continue our Eric Carle book study. But before I started, something that we would have done in class, if we would have been meeting in class and talking about Eric Carle, one of the fun things that I like to do with you guys is talk about what we can do because of Eric Carle. Now he is if you know, we learned a little bit about his history, and we know that he's an author, we know that he's an illustrator, and we know that he had quite an amazing life. He grew up in Germany, he's moved to the United States, and he has a lot of people in his life that have influenced him to be the author and illustrator that he is today. And so when we look at an Eric Carle story, what's really special about his stories is he includes a lot of text features, and text features are just features of a story that you can look at, and you can pinpoint a lot of different important things that he adds to a story that help make it creative, that help make it just more interesting to read. And these are all they're all like little things that you are looking for to find in his stories. Now they're not in every single one of his stories, but in each one of the stories that he's written, there's a different type of text feature that you can usually pick out when you read his stories. So if you read something like he uses unique kinds of pages. So if you look in a book like The Hungry Caterpillar, and of course we'll take a look at The Hungry Caterpillar later, but he does use these unique pages where, as I know that you can't see it really well, but where he starts off and he starts off on Monday and then Tuesday and then Wednesday. So his pages change as he writes his story. So they start off the full page, and then they condense down to smaller pages so you can get involved with the story a little bit more. And he does the same thing in the Mixed Up Chameleon. He has surprise endings. Sometimes you might think that you know the ending of a story, and he might surprise you a little bit. So in a lot of his stories, like Do You Want to Be My Friend, or The Tiny Seed, or I mean a lot of his stories, you can go through and you might think you know what he's going to do at the end if you haven't heard the story, and then he might surprise you with something different at the end. So surprise endings are definitely something to look for in an Eric Carle book. He'll usually underline, if there's words that are important, he'll underline those words so that you can see that those are words that you need to remember. Raised printing. If you notice in some of his stories, and again, like I tried to order a ton of Eric Carle books, and of course I don't even have his whole catalog, and then of course half of my own are at school, so I don't have the one that has the raised writing, but you can sometimes see that, you know, the writing on different pages, you know, it's different. Some might be at the top, some might be at the bottom, so you just have to look at where he uses the text in his stories as well. Sound effects. Some of his stories have sound effects, so you can read those sound effects as he writes. He might tell side information. So in Hello Red Fox, if you open up the story, he'll go through and he'll actually give you some notes, some interesting information about maybe why he's writing the story, or something that he had experienced, and so he's going to add that into the story for you to read beforehand, so you kind of have a background about where he got the inspiration for his story. His dedications are amazing. In a lot of his stories, he has dedications, and dedications are who he writes the story for. And so even this one, for the Mixed Up Chameleon, he dedicates the story to all the children who have worked with me on this book. So he dedicates it to the children, which is really cool. So you can go through and look at all of his different stories and see who he's dedicated the story to. Speech bubbles. A lot of you know what speech bubbles are, but if you're not familiar with speech bubbles, again, this is an example. You can see it. Do you want to be my friend? We have the mouse who's speaking. And so specifically in this story, he does use speech bubbles and do you want to be my friend? Describing words. We call those adjectives. Adjectives describe nouns. And he uses a lot of describing words to describe what's going on in the story. So we'll talk about like the Mixed Up Chameleon. I mean, the chameleon itself, mixed up, describes the chameleon, and so he uses those describing words throughout the story. And as you read through some of his stories, you can go through and really all of his stories he uses describing words, just even in the titles of his stories, like the mixed up chameleon, the very hungry caterpillar, because the caterpillar is hungry. You have the grouchy ladybug, the ladybug is grouchy, the lonely firefly, the tiny seed. So you can go through a lot of his stories and pick out those describing words. And then, of course, what I love about him the most is that he creates patterns in his stories. So when you read his stories, because he creates those patterns, it's easy to pick up on the rhythm of the story. So you can go through and you can identify what possibly is going to happen next. And I think a story that I have, I'm trying to, like I said, I've got like, my lap is full of books right now, boys and girls. But an example of that would be like today is Monday. So again, he's creating that pattern where he starts off on Monday. So he'll say today is Monday, and then he'll say what Monday is. So today is Monday, Monday string beans. And then he'll say Tuesday spaghetti, Monday string beans. And so you can kind of, you can guess or infer what's going to happen next. Well, Wednesday is going to be something that he's going to repeat back Tuesday and then Monday. So when you get to the end of the book, you know that he's going through the days of the week, and then he goes backwards. So he starts Sunday, then he goes Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. So he creates those patterns in his books that are really, really cool that you can, again, pick up on, and it helps you understand the story a little bit better. Okay, so he also uses math. I think for some of his books, I know that one might have been a little bit of a kind of a stretch, but like with this one, 1, 2, 3 to the zoo. Of course, you can. I know for first grade, it might be a little bit. It might be you're like, wait a second, I know how to count. So, but in this story, again, he uses numbers and. Like if I was reading this to Bonnie Blue, I could go through and use the story to help her learn her numbers, and we can talk about the pictures and the artwork. And of course, his artwork is absolutely amazing. And so we'll actually next week we'll do another talk about his artwork and how he creates his artwork. But I just wanted to just point out these different text features of his stories, because when you pick up a book by Eric Carle, you're picking up a really special story. They're stories that he's come up with. They're stories that relate to his life, that he's thought up and has decided to recreate. So he recreates the stories from his life, and how he writes is just so unique and so unique and so amazing that every story that you read is different and it's interesting. And it's just fun to look at. So if you ever get an opportunity, I just always say, if you ever go to the library, always check out an Eric Carle book, because he definitely has a lot of interesting stories in his library. And he has written a ton of books. So as we do our Eric Carle study, the things that we're going to be looking at, again, we're going to be looking at all of these features within a story. So if I'm reading you a story and I start picking out some of those features, then that's something that you can pick out too when you're reading his stories. And then we'll take a closer look at how he creates his artwork next week. So today, this week, we're going to be working on the story, The Mixed Up Chameleon. And I'm going to read it to you. I'm also going to include a video it's like a video version of it, and then a little art project that goes along with it. But we're going to start off today with The Mixed Up Chameleon by Eric Carle. And it says, on a shiny green leaf sat a small green chameleon. It moved onto a brown tree and turned brownish. Then it rested on a red flower and turned reddish. When the chameleon moved slowly across the yellow sand, it turned yellowish. You could hardly see it. Why does a chameleon, why is he changing all those colors? So you think about that. When the chameleon was warm and had something to eat, it turned sparkling green. So there's one of our describing words, sparkling green. But when it was cold and hungry, it turned gray and dull. So sparkling green, gray and dull. When the chameleon was hungry, it sat still and waited. Only its eyes moved up, down, sideways, until it spotted a fly. Then the chameleon's long and sticky tongue shot out and caught the fly. That was its life. It was not very exciting. But one day, the chameleon saw a zoo. It had never seen so many beautiful animals. Here's where we're going to start to see some of those unique pages. It says, the chameleon thought, how small I am, how slow, how weak. I wish I could be big and white like a polar bear. And the chameleon's wish came true. But was it happy? No. I wish I could be handsome, like a flamingo. I wish I could be smart, like a fox. I wish I could swim like a fish. I think it's interesting to see what's starting to happen to him. Why is he making all of these wishes? I wish I could run like a deer. I wish I could see things far away like a giraffe. I wish I could hide in a shell like a turtle. I wish I could be strong like an elephant. I wish I could be funny like a seal. I wish I could be like people. Just then a fly flew by. The chameleon was very hungry, but the chameleon was very mixed up. It was a little of this and it was a little of that, and it couldn't catch the fly. Very mixed up. I wish I could be myself. And the chameleon's wish came true, and it caught the fly. So in our story, the mixed up chameleon, he, again in the back, he talks about how he and why he writes, why he wrote this book. And so it talks about how this book had a lot of co-authors, because the kids are interested to see how his books were made. And so together, as he would talk to kids, the story just kind of came together. But what I love about this story, boys and girls, is just this interesting story about this chameleon. And the chameleon doesn't think his life is very exciting until he until he discovers one day that not only can he change his color, like at the beginning of the story, he starts to change his size and shape too. So as he goes to the zoo and he sees all these wonderful and exotic animals, he decides that he wants to have some of those. He wants to be like those animals at the zoo. But what happens when he becomes all of these animals at once? Is that who he truly wanted to be? And so that's something that we can think about as we read the story or listen to the story of the Mixed Up Chameleon. So one of your activities that you're going to be working on today and throughout this week is just thinking about what makes you special. Did the chameleon have to change to be like all of those exotic animals, or was he special just the way that he was? And I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about what makes you your unique self and what makes you special. And so for one of your activities, you will be answering that question. So as you read the story of the Mixed Up Chameleon, think about that. What makes you unique and special as well? So we will learn a little bit. We'll learn more about Eric Carle and read more of his stories through the next couple weeks. And so I hope you enjoyed the Mixed Up Chameleon. We'll talk to you guys soon.